Hello to all you beautiful listeners out there, and welcome back. My name is Kieran Singer here at Undead Storyteller, ready to bring you some more spooky stories today. I hope you're ready to embrace the terror with these 4 demonic encounters brought to you via Reddit, every horror narrator's favorite source for scary stories here on YouTube, though if I'm wrong about that, you actually know, so feel free to correct me in the comments, of course. Before we launch in, quick reminder to everyone who has been interested in the upcoming releases of my ongoing membership series featuring an original work of mine titled Fall of a Dark Regime, Demise of the Truthbringer. The work is a dark romance featuring a strong female character who, I'll say it again, to be honest, I still can't figure out if she falls into the anti-hero category. So for those who have already listened, as we move along with that, let me know what you think. The work is gritty and gory, set in a dystopian reality where survival and resistance against an evil empire are central. For access to these episodes, it's only $4.99 a month and you get multiple membership perks, including access to exclusive content like this epically awesome series, as well as special member emojis, loyalty badges that let you stand out in the comments, and early access to all videos scheduled for release on the main channel. Special shout out, by the way, to the channel's current members. You guys are amazing and your support has been very much appreciated. A final update for everyone regarding merchandise before we start the video. 3 things. One is that I will not be doing New Year's merchandise as I was originally planning to push forward with, simply because of how far into the holidays that we are already, combined with the fact that there are no new sales coming up for the shop until January 1st, which I'll keep you updated on. And when that does kick off, it will be a 25% off of everything 5-day sale campaign ending on January 6th. The second thing is that instead of aiming for New Year's merch, I will be doing something special and limited edition for Valentine's Day. And that, everybody, is what will be on sale through the month of January so that everyone has the chance to get theirs for themselves or their loved ones before the big day. And for the third item on the merchandise agenda, because of the fact that I failed to keep everyone updated through October and November, when it came to the Halloween limited edition merchandise, I know, shame on me, I am going to extend its time on the website through the end of January so that it will be featured in upcoming product tags. While I haven't quite gotten the art of the product tag nailed down yet, I've made sure to include a link to the merch shop below in comments where it is pinned, so be sure and check that out. Thank you for listening to today's video. If you enjoy these stories, please do me a huge favor and hit like and subscribe. Make sure you hit that notification bell also to make sure that you always keep up to date with new uploads. Now, without further ado, let's get into these truly creepy demonic encounters. In 2009, I was located in Bakwa, Afghanistan, on top of a hill overlooking a cemetery. The customs in that part of the world don't dictate for the dead to be buried as they are here in the United States. Instead, they lay their loved ones on the dirt and cover them with piles of rocks with simple sticks and torn clothing as markers for them to visit later on. I was on my post standing watch. It was roughly 2:45 in the morning at that time, and I had been on post since midnight. A rock the size of a golf ball smacked the bulletproof glass just above my machine gun. I used my night vision and thermal imaging to see if anyone was out in front of my post trying to get my attention. There was nothing to be seen, only darkness. I calmed my nerves, drank a few sips of water, told myself to just relax, there was nothing to worry about. 10 minutes passed when, bam! Another rock, a slightly bigger one than before, smacked the same spot on the glass. I called my command center and informed them of my situation, asking if they could use the thermal camera from their position to see if anyone was near my post. He informed me that there was no one. With my mind wary and feeling ever more alert, I waited and planned what I would do should it happen a third time. I decided I would exit my post immediately and fire an illumination round into the sky, lighting up my entire area. 15 more minutes passed when bang, a rock the size of a tennis ball smashed my window. It was immediately followed by more rocks hitting me in the chest, pebbles and dust scattering all over my machine gun. It was time to fire that illumination round and see what was going on once and for all. Then, as I turned around, behind me in the corner of my post stood a towering creature. He was at least 9 feet tall. I froze in place, unable to scream, breathe, blink. It was as if he were in total control of me, as if he were controlling me through my fear. As he stared at me with his deep red eyes, I found myself only able to make out certain things about him. He had 12 total horns, 3 in each side of his face, and 3 coming out of each shoulder. There were crater-like holes in his face, with bugs crawling in and out of them. His arms were abnormally long, his fingers the same, and with giant claws as well. He was terrifying. We continued eyeing each other for what felt like an eternity. Water began rushing from my eyes from the pain of being unable to blink. And when he finally did allow me to blink, when my eyes opened again, he was gone. I gasped for air and jumped from that 10-foot-high post, skipping the ladder completely, and ran straight to the command center. I told the commanding officer, and only him, what I had experienced. I was in Bakwa for an additional 30 days, never once looking back toward that post and never speaking of it to anyone. It wasn't that I didn't want to share my story. It was that I was afraid that if I spoke of him, that he would come back. My second encounter with this demonic entity took place in 2011. I was at a training exercise in the middle of the Mojave Desert. I had been dealing with this unsettling feeling for several days and couldn't understand why. It wasn't so much a sick or nauseous feeling, but more like my senses had been heightened, and I could feel this air of sadness overwhelm me periodically throughout the day. I would catch myself staring off into the distance, trying to figure out what was going on with me. With 2 years having passed since my encounter, and me being back in the States by then, he never came to mind. On the 3rd night of being unable to shake off this feeling, I laid down on my cot and drifted off to sleep. As I lay there, sound asleep, it felt like someone kicked my cot with all their might. I jolted awake and looked at my watch. It was 3:01. There was one guy awake on the other side of the building on guard duty. The whole area was pitch black aside from 2 glowing exit signs, one of which was just above his head. I rolled over onto my left side, and there he was, up in the corner. Both of his arms were running the length of the walls, and his legs were tucked up to his chest. His bright red eyes froze my body in place. The degree of fear that overcame me physically to this day gives me goosebumps to recall. I tried calling out to the Marine across the way, but I couldn't speak. I tried with every fiber of my being, but not a sound would escape my lips. My eyes were fixated on him. It was the same horrible event all over again, being unable to blink, breathe, or move. Just as before, time seemed to slow, making it feel as if the whole thing were dragging on perpetually. He never said a word. He doesn't have to. His presence is enough, and he knows that. After some time he vanished, and I was able to move again. I lifted my head off of my soaking wet pillow, then turned face down and prayed until I passed out from exhaustion. My third and final encounter occurred during the summer again, this time in 2013. 4 years from the first encounter, and 2 years from the second. I was going through a rough patch in life. I was getting ready to deploy for the 4th time, and was simultaneously going through a tough divorce. My ex-wife was asleep upstairs in our bedroom, and I was watching TV in the living room before bed. I finished relaxing for the night and shut off the lights along with the TV. The only light left was coming from the digital clock on the microwave. I fell asleep shortly after, still laying on the couch, and my mind wandered off into a dream. I was back in high school, sitting in the cafeteria with my friends. I had just finished my meal and looked up from my tray, smiling, when in front of me, standing between the 2 double doors about 60 feet away, was the figure. The sight scared me out of my sleep, but somehow I was still stuck in my dream. My eyes could see my living room and the dim light from the kitchen over my left shoulder. My front blinds and the street light from the outside shining through it in split sections. I could see my ceiling. Everything around me was crystal clear. I just couldn't move. No matter how hard I struggled to do so, I couldn't even move my arms or legs. I couldn't blink. I couldn't speak. And even though I could see my living room, I was still stuck in his horrible presence. My thought process kept telling me that he was far enough away that maybe I could escape. Back in the dream, I stood up from my table to dispose of my tray and get out through the door to my left. As soon as my foot hit the threshold, though, his hand grabbed my shoulder and I cried out in pain. Each of his fingers were as big as my hand. His nails pierced my skin, his first 4 fingers driving down and into my ribs. I could feel my bones cracking, feel the pop as he punctured my lung as they made their way through my body and out my back. His thumb drove through my spine, snapping it into pieces. I'm lying there in the dream, crying out, tears streaming down my face, as I longed to take in just 1 ounce of oxygen. The sheer agony was what allowed me to break free that time, to blink at last. When I did, I was back in my dreams. Only this time we were on a road in the middle of the desert. He was up ahead of me, and my body was being dragged face down across the pavement. I could feel the skin of my face being ripped off as he walked down the road. His arm was fully extended, pushing me toward the ground to inflict more pain, slowly applying more pressure, pushing his hands deeper and deeper into my body, breaking me further and further apart. We came to a row of Joshua trees lining the road. He stopped and looked to the right at a massive weeping willow off to the side and began dragging me through the sand toward it. The sun started to rise in the distance between 2 mountains. He took a few steps forward, embracing the heat of the sun and raising his arms, extending them out to the sides. I could see the entire outline of his figure, and I will never forget the smell of his burned flesh as the breeze passed. He turned around and faced me, his huge, glowing red eyes feeling as if they were burning through me. All I wanted in that moment was to be able to close my own eyes, so that I didn't have to see him. But it wasn't an option. My body once again would not allow it. He raised his left hand and opened his fingers wide, swinging his arm toward me. As I'm lying there, hoping that he won't kill me with a single blow, he drove his hand down into the roots of the tree and ripped out the bottom section. He tossed it to the side as millions of red and black ants began pouring out of the earth at the base of the trunk. The ants engulfed my body, crawling under me as if they meant to carry me away. Then, at what seemed to be him having given them permission to do so, they began consuming my body. I could feel each bite as he stood over, watching me suffer. I could still feel my brain telling my body to move, but my body was still paralyzed. My eyes felt like they hadn't shut in an hour. My pillow was so soaked from tears you could probably have wringed it out. He walked toward me, placing one leg on each side of my body. He tilted his head toward the sky, opening his mouth to expose the giant fangs within, screamed, and bent at the waist. Just before his teeth reached my face, I snapped out of paralysis and ran screaming to my kitchen from the perceived pain of the ant bites. I could still feel that and them crawling on me. I flipped on the lights as I ran, then turned on the water. I used the hose to spray my body down in the middle of the floor. My ex-wife came running down the stairs, screaming at me in a panic, asking what was going on. A few months later, I was having a dream of someone guiding me toward a black box that I sent home from my second tour in Afghan. They led me to the box in my garage where it was being stored, and inside that box was a smaller box. As I was opening it, I woke up to a voice saying salvation. A little backstory here. Prior to every foot patrol I went on during the 15 months I spent in that country, I put on a bandana. Printed on that bandana was a verse from Psalms. The next day, when I went into the garage, I opened the box, and lo and behold, inside was my bandana. A week or so later, I tattooed this on my chest. I have yet to encounter the entity again. I was terrified in 2017, knowing the pattern of him visiting me every 2 years. But time has continued to pass, and he has continued to stay away. I don't know if it's truly faith that's granted me protection, or if he simply moved on. Either way, I'm grateful to be rid of the red-eyed demon. When I was around 6 or 7 years old, my mother and I were on a routine grocery run to our local Walmart. I remember getting out of the car and walking up to the entrance. We had parked sort of in the back and had to go a little way to get there. As we were making our way, I noticed a homeless man asking for change from everyone walking by. When he asked the woman in front of us, she turned him away and he began to scoff at her, making rude remarks. We walked past him with haste, as he was becoming extremely agitated. We continued inside, got our groceries, and everything was fine. After we went through the checkout, I remember my mother taking out $2 to give to the man, who was still at the entrance. She wanted to hand him the money and be on our way without conflict, hoping to avoid being harassed like the woman in front of us had been. As we headed back toward the doors to leave, I raised my arms for my mother to pick me up. I was afraid of the encounter that we were about to have with the man. She picked me up, and we kept moving. Before the man could even ask us for the money, my mother gave him the cash, and we walked away just as she had hoped, conflict-free. At this point, I was being carried by her, my head on her shoulder, facing behind her. Halfway to the car, I looked up from the pavement. When I did, I made eye contact with the man who was staring directly at me with the most sinister expression on his face. His features were distorted, and what I can only describe as demonic. He was smiling and sticking his tongue out nearly down to his chest. He let out a long hiss, and his eyes rolled back into his head, seemingly invisible to the other people passing by. I still to this day do not understand how I could have been so far away, but have been able to hear him hissing as loudly as if his mouth had been placed right next to my ear. I'm sure it could be dismissed as some homeless guy on drugs combined with the overly active imagination of a small child. Still, though, even now, as an adult, I truly believe that this was a demonic entity that had possessed some poor soul during the lowest point of their life. Witnessing it in its true form messed me up for a long time and has been a major factor behind my belief in the paranormal. When I was 14, I had a strange encounter that continues to puzzle me years later. My parents are divorced, and sometimes on the weekends I would go to my mother's place. The house she lived in was a creepy old farmhouse that had been converted into several small apartments. It was between 150 to 200 years old. My mother told me off and on of odd sounds that she had been hearing, of seeing things out of the corner of her eyes, and routinely feeling as if she were being watched. One weekend when I spent the night, I brought my Nintendo 64 because my mom would go to bed early, and I would be awake for a few more hours. I was sitting Indian style on the floor playing, and had just finished a mission. I set the controller down behind and to the left of me. Directly behind me was a recliner. I'll never forget what happened next. I went to grab the controller, and there was a cloven hoof on the floor beside it. Insects and blood were coming from the sliver separating it. I slowly raised my eyes, and this demonic figure was staring back at me. It leaned down toward me, put its face in my face, and grinned the most evil smile. More evil than anything I could have imagined. It was a black-eyed, red-faced, one-winged monster. Blood dripped from its teeth. The moment was so surreal. I went into a panic attack and blacked out. I later discovered that reaction was my fight-or-flight response overwhelming me. I don't know how long that I was unconscious for. When I came to, I was laying on the floor, barely able to move. The entity was sitting in the recliner behind me, laughing. It was as if my fear, and my energy along with it, had been drained from me. I lost all strength. It took everything I could muster for me to crawl to my mom's room and wake her up. We talked, and she believed me. She told me that she too had seen the same being earlier that week. She hadn't mentioned anything out of her need to protect me and not wanting to scare me. I don't think I'll ever know what to make of it. I have no doubt that demons and angels are real, and I know better than anyone that the last thing you want to encounter is a demon smiling in your face. I volunteered for a season at the Creepy Hollow Haunted House attraction in Texas just south of Houston. My assignment was to sit in a giant metal cage in the Fear Factory, which was a zombie-styled exhibit, and scream at people. I would bang on the walls, yell and shout, tell people I want to eat them. Normally we had 2 or 3 people in this cage, but this time it was just me due to staffing issues. I went through the night doing my thing, even won a Best Scare award for single-handedly doing the job. On my floor there was just me and one other volunteer who went up and down the stairs frequently. At around 11 that night, I started to smell sulfur and ammonia. I looked in the corner and to my surprise, I saw a giant figure crouched there. The walls in that room were roughly 8 feet tall, and that thing, whatever it was, looked to be somewhere between 10 to 12 feet in height, based on the way that it was having to hunch over. The best working description I've managed to come up with in regards to its physical appearance is that of a Slender Man-style frame, except that everything was black and scratchy like the pictures every kid in horror movies draw when they show their parents their so-called friend. The thing about the way it looked that stuck with me the most vividly through the years, though, would definitely be its eyes. It was like their gaze penetrated my soul. The other volunteer was, of course, downstairs while this whole encounter was taking place. A few customers came by, and I don't know if they couldn't see it or what, but they would without fail always walk right by it without so much as a second glance. After this happened a few times, I heard it speak. I heard it calling my full, legal name. I went by JP, so no one I worked with actually knew my name. At this point, I had no idea what was happening. I had some false sense of security because of the cage that I was locked in. I looked away from it and started praying, keeping my eyes shut tight. I can't explain what that thing was, or what attracted it to me, but believe me when I tell you I thought that those next 5 minutes would never end. I consistently felt as if it were easing its way over, creeping up on me the way a cat stalks its prey. Then it vanished, the smell of sulfur and ammonia disappearing along with it. That was when the other volunteer came back up the stairs. Customers kept coming the rest of that night. I never volunteered there again. After I spoke with some buddies, they told me that the sulfur and ammonia smell meant that it was probably a demon, but I truthfully don't know, and I don't think that I really want to.